to be offered the same job. The same thing with that improvement of the mind that fell into his hands. It could fall into the hands of 1,000 people, but nobody would have used the book to the same degree that Michael Faraday used it. Mr. Dance, wandering into the store, was impressed by what he had compiled, by the diligence, the work ethic, and the persistence that this young man demonstrated. It was he himself that created these circumstances by his energy, by his interest, by the love he showed for for the work that he was doing. Excuse me. So I maintain that Michael Faraday, hearing this voice within him, was able to make the most critical decisions in his life. And that it was by feeling the sense of destiny early on that he wasn't destined to be the son of a blacksmith, that he wasn't destined to be just a bookbinder working in a bookshelf for his whole life, that he was fated from when the fact he first read that book on electricity and chemistry to be a great scientist. That was what pushed him past all the incredibly impossible obstacles that he faced in life. The other example I want to share with you is of a contemporary example, a woman that I interviewed for the book, a mini Albert Einstein, one of the most brilliant women I've ever met. Her name is Yoki Matsuoka. Yoki Matsuoka, and her story illustrates a much different way of approaching this sense of destiny, the one I find very relevant to our times. Yoki Matsuoka was born in Japan, grew up there in the 70s. And as a young girl, she realized that she was kind of peculiar. She was interested in sports. She was very good at sports, tennis and swimming. But what she really liked about sports was how the body could accomplish so many amazing, graceful things, how the mind and the body could work together. She was also really interested in machines and technology, but she was interested almost in what made them tick, what made them work, what made them alive. She was also interested in math and the hard sciences. And as a child, as a young girl, she somehow imagined that she would be able to combine all of these interests in some career, whatever that would be. But in Japan, you had to specialize from a very early age. You had to choose something very particular. You couldn't be a generalist like that. And so she made a very critical decision. She found her way to the United States and got admitted to UC Berkeley as an undergrad. In the States, she could have much more freedom to choose a broader path. She decided she would major in electrical engineering. This seemed the perfect sort of opening field for her, because studying electrical engineering, you could design all kinds of machines, but there were many different avenues you could take. One day, she confessed to her professor that her lifelong dream, or the dream that she had when she was a young girl, was to build a robot that could play tennis. That would be how she could combine all those weird interests of her. And to her surprise, he didn't laugh at her. He said, well, we have a robotics class here at Berkeley. It's this new field. It's very exciting, and I want to invite you to take the class. She took the robotics class at Berkeley, and suddenly a light bulb went on in her head, and she said, this is the field for me. This is perfect. She went on to pursue this more deeply and then got herself admitted to the most prestigious robotics laboratory in the world, the robotics lab at MIT. At MIT, they were designing the new state-of-the-art robot, and she volunteered to be the one that would design the hand. This would be her chance to do all those things that she had always wanted to do as a child, combine all those weird interests of her. She started going deeper and deeper into the study of the hand and how to build it, and suddenly she realized that this wasn't enough. Her electrical engineering background wasn't enough. She wanted to know what made the hand so human, so alive, how the hand is connected to the brain. So she decided after she got her degree at MIT to get a PhD in neuroscience at MIT, which she proceeded to do. With these 2 degrees, she then went on to design a prosthetic robotic hand that was absolutely astounding. It was incredibly lifelike. It was more human than any hand anybody had ever designed. And this was somebody 25. It became the industry standard, and it catapulted her to fame. She got the MacArthur Genius Grant, on and on and on. She decided to create her own field that she called new robotics. It was a mix of neuroscience and robotics. She would be on the frontier of designing technology and products that would be more and more lifelike. They would simulate how the human brain actually works. She went on, after going into new robotics, to then segue into a field that really fascinated her, green technology. She went on to work for a company called Nest Labs, where she is right now in Silicon Valley. She's the senior vice president in charge of technology. She worked on designing a thermostat for the house that operates almost as your personal assistant. This thermostat learns from your behavior how you need to heat up your house, and in the same process, able to save a lot of energy, but kind of adapts to who you are and how you watch the television, and on and on and on, and turns it on and off according to all this. An amazing device, and she's going to be inventing all sorts of other devices like that. Now, the thing about Yoki Matsuoka that I find fascinating, and where I consider this a more modern example, is that she doesn't know when she's 8 or 9 or 12 what exactly she should be doing, like Michael Faraday did. It was this sort of general idea of a direction that she needed to take in life, which I think is more human and is how a lot of us feel. But feeling this kind of inner radar, this strong sense of what she was meant to do, of the kinds of things that fell within that wheelhouse of power that were comfortable and easy and felt right to her, she was able to make all of the right choices. She was able to find her way to the United States, where she could have the freedom to explore more. She found her way to what she recognized from the moment she got into the robotics lab, that this was the right thing for her. She realized as she was designing it that she needed to take this further and study neuroscience, on and on and on. If she had rebelled against her fate, this sense of destiny, she would have stayed in Japan, or she would have stayed just learning how to be an electrical engineer and design robots. She would not have become a master. By following her fate, by accumulating all of these different incredible skills that I outlined to her, she can essentially write her ticket. She's able to create businesses or products or ideas that completely reflect her uniqueness. And what you can say about these great masters that I'm talking about, these highly successful people, whether it's Yoki Matsuoka, Michael Faraday, Steve Jobs, on and on and on, is that they are unique. They are irreplaceable. They are one of a kind. They are originals. Basically because they've followed the path that I've outlined for you tonight. So, in conclusion, I want you to leave here with 4 basic, maybe slightly counterintuitive ideas that I want you to ponder long after you leave here. The first is, I want you to think of a sense of destiny, of fate, actually applying to you and your individual lives. I want you to think wider than you normally think, as opposed to, I want to study this particular field, or I need to get this job. I want you to think of the larger arc of your life and the sense that you were born with this uniqueness that I have mentioned, and that you were destined or fated to actually create, build, invent, write, do whatever it was. It doesn't have to be on the order of an Albert Einstein or a Yoki Matsuoka or a Tiger Woods. It can be smaller. It can be you were meant to start this simple kind of business. You were meant to express this particular idea in a movie or a film or whatever it is. But that sense that you are connected to your destiny, to a sense of purpose, is so vital and so important. And I want you to think about that in terms of your own lives. The second thing is, I want you to connect the sense of this uniqueness that I mentioned, these primal inclinations. Now, how this might be counterintuitive is often we think of what makes us different or strange as something that we have to run away from, something that is not good. But in fact, that is the source of your strength, that is the source of any kind of power you're going to have in life. And as you're entering, if you're in your early 20s or you're even older and you're thinking about your career and where you're headed, you have to go through a process. You have to think back to your earliest years, to those fields that excited you in that primal way, like it excited Albert Einstein with the compass. They're there, that information is there, you're just not paying attention to it. You have to look at the kinds of things in the present that excite you with a curiosity that's beyond normal. I know, for instance, with myself, whenever I open the New York Times, and ever there's an article about our earliest ancestors, I have to read that article. I have to devour everything about it. I'm so fascinated with that subject. I don't care if it's about the teeth that they discovered in the earliest Neanderthal. I just have to read it. I maintain that all of you, there's something like that in the newspaper, on the internet. That's a sign of something of that uniqueness that I'm talking about. There's also the negative side of the coin. There's also the things that you hate, that you've discovered as you're in your career that you don't want to ever have to deal with. One of the people that I interviewed, Paul Graham, one of the contemporary masters, he learned early on that he hates any kind of bureaucracy, any kind of political environment. That's the flip side of these natural primal inclinations that I'm talking about. So I want you to go through this process and reconnect with this uniqueness that I believe each and every one of you have. The third thing is I want you to think of your career path not as this sort of random thing that just sort of happens to you, that you live in the moment and whatever appears you have to take, or this direction or that direction, the usual passive approach that a lot of people have. I want you to think of your career path as actually a work of art, something that you are creating, that you are forging, that you are making, that it's not something that just happens to you. If it's something, that direct path I mentioned, something that you know from early on that you're going to be the next Michael Jordan, then don't listen to other people and go take that direct path and see where it leads. If you're not Michael Jordan, you could end up becoming a great basketball coach or teacher or whatever, the path that many people have taken in life. I have the example in the book of Freddie Roach, the great boxing trainer who basically failed as a boxer and then realized that he was meant to be a trainer. You take that approach. If it's more the indirect idea, which I think is true for many of us, you find that first all-important step, like Yoki Matsuoka did with electrical and engineering, a path that offers you many branches and many possibilities for you to explore. Your 20s are what I call your apprenticeship years. It's the years that you should be accumulating as many skills as possible. We're entering a skill-based economy where the people like Yoki Matsuoka, who've accumulated 2 or 3 or 4 skills, they can write their ticket for the future. You want to be accumulating as many skills as possible. Basically, though, having an active sense of this is the path that I'm going to forge for my life. It's flexible, you're open to things that happen in the moment, but you have that inner radar that I'm talking about where you can recognize a false path from one that's a real opportunity. And finally, I want you to get over this notion that I find so annoying that so many people have, that success and power in life is dependent on something like genetics. Like some people are born with a larger brain, or they have wealthy parents who are able to send them to the right school, or it's all a matter of luck. What really makes people successful and powerful in life, and it's not just me saying this, I read hundreds of books on the subject, what makes people successful is their degree of motivation. Okay, I could repeat it 100 times, but it's true every time I say it. When you are motivated, when you feel yourself emotionally engaged in the subject, you learn faster. You learn what could take somebody 10 years to learn, you can learn in 2 years. When you feel emotionally engaged with something, you're able to push past all the obstacles. The sense that it's genetics or the size of our brain or our parents' money, you can't control any of that, obviously. And they can become kind of crutches for some people. But the amount of motivation you feel, the emotional connection you have to what you're studying or doing, that is something within your control. That is something you can choose to take. And it is, you're going to find people giving you all kinds of great advice about your careers, about where you should go, you know, for your MBA, et cetera. But if there's one piece of advice that I think is more important than that, it is this idea of following these natural inclinations and creating your own career path and finding a way to engage those deepest motivating parts of your psyche. So thank you very much for listening to all of this. I know I've overburdened you with information, loaded you like pack mules, but I want to encourage you to ask me any questions. Yeah.
I was going to say 48 Laws of Power, definitely one of my favorite books of all time, and I'm glad you mentioned Paul Graham. Oh, thank you. I thought you were loud.
Oh, I forgot to say that.
Okay. I'll hold on this for now, but Paul Graham, I actually have read a lot of articles. I'm trying to prep for his program, so I knew there was a connection. I knew there was a connection when you started talking about the articles that I've read, but what astonished me about the book, and obviously I love the way you presented the material, and me being kind of a sales guy, I really like the presentation, but how did you actually bring together all the stories and quotes? Because again, as I was reading it,
Which book are you referring to?
Oh, sorry, 48 Laws of Power.
Uh-huh.
Completely astonished how you brought that all together. So I guess what I'd like to hear is just how you did that, and maybe also the time frame that it took you in this project.
48 Laws?
Correct, yes.
Well, I was younger. I was like 38 years old. I was pretty desperate because I hated where I was, working in Hollywood and jobs that didn't fit me. So I was extremely motivated, which fits in with my idea that I just talked to you about. It took me 2 years to write, and that includes reading hundreds of books for the research, organizing all of that material, which was a massive task, writing it, editing it. Honestly, when I look back, I had no idea how I did it. I don't think I slept. I worked on Christmas, my birthday, my mother's birthday. I just didn't stop. And what was hard was I had no template. All of my subsequent books, I have kind of a system that I've created with my note cards, etc. I had no system. I had nothing to go by. And as you know, for better or worse, there's no other book like that with the things on the side and the quotes and the images. So I had to create it. And I think maybe just the excitement of building a book that is so different was just a lot of fun. It was kind of like a Lego type thing, you know. I'm just constructing this thing, and I think it was just my desperation and my motivation that made me work harder than I've ever worked in my whole life. Yeah.
Does your book Mastery, does it talk about specific actions a person should take as well as the information from the studies that you've done and examples in the book?
Oh yeah. I mean, I told you it's Thomas's Guide to Practical Shipbuilding. You know, I'm there pretty hands-on. I covered the first chapter in depth here tonight, giving you a pretty good feel for it, but there's 6 chapters, there's sort of 6 kind of phases leading to mastery. So for instance, in the apprenticeship chapter, I show you how you should, it's not just, you learn, you get in the university system a certain way of learning. And I'm trying to say, well, no, there's a different way of learning that's more active. And here's how you do it. And here's examples of people who've done it. And you have to become a consummate observer. You have to sort of tamp down your ego and your need for attention and learn how to observe people and learn how to observe the rules of the environment that you're in, on and on and on. So it's extremely practical oriented for each phase that I'm taking you through. Is that sort of your question? Okay.
Did you realize there was a market niche and reverse engineer some of your ideas to that, or was it all created from the spark of an idea which you put?
Did you all hear that?
No.
Okay, go.
Did you realize when you wrote these books there was a market niche, and if so, did you reverse engineer any of your ideas to that, to address that, or was it all from sparking an idea and enjoying what you did?
You know, it's an important question, and you know, it's never black and white, these kind of things. But my percentage is much more loaded away from the market niche idea. There are people who think first of that. What is the niche I can fit in? Where's the market? Who's going to be interested in this book? And then they proceed to write it. And I can't do that. I have to start with something that really personally excites me and interests me. Of course, that could be about something that nobody wants to read about, so I'm not going to write a book on that subject. Maybe when I'm in my 80s, I'll write that book. But for now, I have to make a living. So it's a 10% part of the equation, but 90% of it is what excites me. And I had been interviewing 50 Cent, other people, been reading about Napoleon Bonaparte, and I had noticed that all these people had ended up with this sort of intuitive power, the kind of thing that Gladwell talks about in Outliers and Blink, where they have a feel for what should be next, a feel for trends, et cetera. And I was fascinated by this. And I thought, I have to write a book about it. Nobody really explains where that high-level intuition comes from. And because I was fascinated with it, I decided I would go do the research on where it came from. And then out of the research, Mastery came. It wasn't exactly the book I had intended from the beginning. These things evolve. But it came from a deep, personal, obsessive need to understand something that nobody else was writing about. When I wrote The Art of Seduction, which was a, sort of a natural segue from 48 Laws, but there was no book out there on this subject. And I can tell you, I know that because I researched it pretty thoroughly. There was nothing on there out there. You either had books that were like for pickup artists on the most banal level about how to pick up some woman in a bar, or you had some Lacanian theory about the unconscious that was equally irrelevant. Nothing